Max, the one to watch for the best in entertainment, now has live sports with the Bleacher Report sports add-on.
5, 4, 3, 2, I let one go.
Stream hundreds of select live games from MLB.
That's gonna go!
NBA, NHL, U.S. Soccer, and NCAA Men's March Madness.
We just see what we think we just saw!
And it's all included for a limited time with any Max subscription.
He got him!
After the promo period, add it for $9.99 a month. Base subscription required.
Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back up front when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
Serie A Chronicles is a Mina Chronicles production.
Oh my god, but yeah, I was rocking back and forth in those last 2 minutes. I was like, please hold on for the win.
Absolutely bonkers game of football. We should talk about it. We should do this. I'm excited to talk about it with you. I don't want to do it before we start recording.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the 2022 Serie A Chronicles podcast with me, Mina and of course, Nicky Bandini. Hi, Nicky.
Hi, I can't believe it, Mina. It's 2022. What happened? How did we get here?
I just feel like it was only 3 days ago that it was 2020 and we had to go home and work from home. And all of a sudden it's 2 years later and we're still at home.
But I saw you in person, Mina. Guys, like some of you may already know this if you're listening, you might have seen us, but for the first time since the start of the pandemic, Mina and I actually got to go to a studio and make a show together. We were on Sky Sports News in the UK, and it was so exciting to see you in person.
It was,
to give you a hug
really.
Oh.
Because for so many years, Nicky and I would see each other like once a week to do our show and the predecessor of this podcast. And then all of a sudden, obviously, once the pandemic happened, I mean, we were being sent out to Italy together. We were going to studios together. So we were always in each other's company. And then all of a sudden, pandemic hits and we didn't see each other for like 2 years, since it started really March. And so it was really, really great to do that. How was your Christmas and New Year? I think everyone knows I got COVID because my voice still doesn't sound like it's back to normal, but I am back to normal. How was your Christmas and New Year?
Christmas and New Year was good. I ate my panettone. My mum came to visit. And it was just the two of us, actually. We had like the lowest of low-key Christmases because my brother and his family were with his in-laws in Malta. I've just moved house. I think I talked about that on the podcast a few times. I've just moved into my own flat. My mum hasn't been able to spend much time down here, what with everything that's been going on. So she came down and we had 3 days of just hanging out, me and mum, which we haven't done in forever. So it was a super, super chilled out Christmas. So those of you who see things on YouTube, asleep on this sofa right behind me by about 6 p.m. having had our lunch. So it was a really, really good day. How about you, Mina? Was there any bright points in amongst the COVID frustration?
COVID. I was isolating. And then at about 4 p.m., my mother shows up and she just flings the door wide open. My mother has such little disregard for like any notion of privacy in life or isolation. And she's got my dad running behind her as usual. Yeah, he's always behind her, just being like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And she's like, I'm sorry, I don't care if you have COVID. I don't care if you spread it to all of us. I don't care if we die. We're going to spend today together. Yeah. And I was like, get away from me. Because I'm like screaming because obviously they're much older. Mm-hmm. My dad, for example, is 84 years old.
Oh my God.
And my mom's early 70s. There's a huge age gap because my dad's that kind of guy. And so they were like, no, we don't care. We just want to spend it with you. And like, you have to be with the family and nobody cares. Yeah. And I was like, I care. Like, what about what I want? And like, I care about you. Like, I want you guys here and I don't want you to suffer. And they're like, come out and stop it. And don't be this idiot. This is what families do. Either way, they didn't actually let me self-isolate for very long. And they eventually caught it from me. And for them, it genuinely was like about a 48-hour bug. Meanwhile, their youngest daughter, which is me, was like dying until well after New Year's Day. So I'm glad, thankfully, that they overcame it very quickly. I think my dad sneezed once. And he kept saying, you see, this is why I had the booster, because I didn't have the booster because I caught COVID. But yeah, that was what it was. Either way, I'm finally back to action. I did enjoy the period because I actually didn't look at my mobile, I think, once. I didn't answer a single email. I didn't look at a single call. It was bliss. It was the first time I had like really sat down. Yeah, and just like binge watched and ate, and it was fun. I mean, other than the fact that I was in pain for most of it, but yeah, it was fun.
I love this about you, Mina. You always tell everyone on here, you're like, oh, I'm the witch of Serie A, and it's a lie. You're an optimist. I know you are. You've got this, the optimist inside you. So even when you were sick, even when things were difficult, you still had that sunniness to you. And that's one of many reasons that I love working with you, Mina, because you're awesome.
Oh, Nicky. I think if people know that we're both Leos, and we used to do a show with Gab, who's also a Leo, and if you're into star signs, that's probably why we're always so like loud and agreeing or disagreeing and just happy people in general, hopefully. But it's nice to have Serie A back.
Are you extra happy today, Mina? Are you extra happy from what happened at the weekend?
There was a part of me after Napoli that was really broken. Because obviously there was a round of fixtures on Thursday. Not all of the games were played. We'll discuss that a little bit later. But I was a little bit dismayed at that performance. And there was a part of me that was like, you know what? I'm just going to come to terms with life. And this is what Juventus are. And I have to just be okay with it, And there is a part of me sometimes that I told you I go in and out with football. I just sort of become a journalist and stop being a fan. And then that game happened against Roma. And up until the 70th minute, I was like, what a stupid team. Juventus are just ridiculous. Like, they're just ridiculous.
De Sciglio con l'esterno per Morata. Dentro il pallone, attenzione di McKennie verso De Sciglio. De Sciglio può calciare. De Sciglio! De Sciglio! De Sciglio! Siamo avanti noi! 4-3! Ha segnato Mattia De Sciglio! È una partita pazzesca! Una rivolta irreale! Pellegrini, parte il tiro di Pellegrini, Szczęsny, poi Pellegrini ancora fuori, l'ha parato Szczęsny, come all'andata, a veritù, Szczęsny dice di no, stavolta Lorenzo Pellegrini, incredibile Szczęsny!
And then bam, like everything that I had stopped feeling, I started to feel all over again. And it was just, it was crazy. I mean, I was rocking back and forth in the final minutes going, please hold on, please hold on, please hold on, I was impressed with players I never thought I'd be impressed with. I was disappointed with players I never thought I'd be disappointed with. I was shouting at Mourinho, even though I was happy that he was losing, but I had so much in my head that was just running, thinking, what's happened to Roma? Like, wow, from Juve. Should Allegri always be on the sidelines? Is this Landucci or Allegri? So a bunch of things. But actually, I just thought about something, Nicky. Before anything, guys, I want you to all know that we have started a Patreon for Chronicles Tifosi to support us on an ongoing basis. And that's patreon.com/Serie A Chronicles. I should have probably said that before.
Sorry, that's my fault. I got you talking about the game. I pushed you onto it before you were ready. It's my fault.
Also, I was just so excited. And the mention of Juventus got me talking all again.
It's hard not to be excited about this game. Like, I'm not a Juventus fan. I'm not a Roma fan. But this game was just madness. Like, I don't think it's the game that you would point to and sort of want to be like, hey, like, here's the case for how sort of strong a league Serie A is. It's not the one which you point to and say, this is where the best teams play. Because frankly, there was a lot of bad football in there as well. But it was just edge of your seat drama and madness in a way that is hard to even put into words. Like I've written a column about it for The Guardian, as always. I write a column for The Guardian on Mondays. But I was sort of looking at the papers this morning first, and I was reading, I think it was Corriere dello Sport was saying, was this a remontada? Was this a comeback, or was this a collapse? And I was thinking,
that's a good question. What is it?
And we can ask it, but those words for me don't cover it, right? Because it's more than that. It's not a collapse or a comeback. It's a melodrama. It's a saga. This was an epic drama of football. It was ridiculousness. You had
a Greek tragedy.
Well, you had so many elements to this, Mina. There's so many things that we can sort of talk about with this game. There's, take a step sort of back to the sort of furthest out zoom lens that you've got, and you think to yourself, 4-3 between an Allegri team and a Mourinho team. There's already a story there, right? Like that's not what you expect for those two managers, those two teams. Then you look at the fact that Roma were 1-0 up and then 3-1 up, and you think, blimey, there's a story there. Then you look at the fact that 3 goals scored by Juventus in 7 minutes, which, as our producer Simon pointed out just before he came on, that's about 3 minutes or more of VAR talk in that time. So it's about 4 minutes of actual football. Then you look at the fact that you've got Lorenzo Pellegrini scoring an amazing free kick with Francesco Totti in the stand, and you've got this moment of captain to captain. Then you look at the fact that you've got Pellegrini later missing the penalty that could save the game with a Roma goalkeeper, former Roma goalkeeper, Wojciech Szczesny in goal. Then you look at the fact there's a sending off. You look at the genuinely tragic part of the game, which is Federico Chiesa suffering a cruciate ligament tear. There's so many stories in this one game of football that it's unreal. Like, I don't even know how you try to explain what happened in 90 minutes at the Stadio Olimpico.
You see, people can talk to me about all the different leagues in the world. Oh, this is the best football. No, there is nothing more entertaining. Like, frankly speaking, there's just nothing more entertaining than Serie A. Because you know what's impossible is I do a betting show sometimes. And if there's one thing that you know is that Juventus rarely score more than a goal. Yeah.
Right.
And so you just have you have these things that you know for sure. And then the rest of it is so unpredictable. And there is so much unpredictability, like Salernitana winning against Verona. And you're thinking, wait, what? Serie A is bonkers. But to see 7 games in a match, like you said, between Mourinho and Allegri, to see Juventus scoring that many goals and just really going for it, to see that kind of collapse from a team that had so much control, to see De Sciglio being the match winner, like De Sciglio. And it was a bonkers, really a bonkers match. And I don't know, I mean, I was watching this obviously as a Juventus fan up until the 70th minute, and I was like, wow, we really have fallen. I mean, Juventus it's just a team that just doesn't know how to start again. I mean, when it falls, and there's nothing there. And obviously there's a part of me that's like, come on, Dybala, do something, not just keep falling, do something. I'm hoping that he's going to somehow, reignite the fire. And shouldn't really be all on him, And you look at Juventus and you think there's no Chiesa now because he's been taken off with an injury. Obviously, we'll talk about that later, but I'm more worried about Italy without Chiesa than I am, even though Juventus is my team. But what a huge loss he is to both his club and his country. It is tragic beyond tragic that he's been diagnosed with a cruciate ligament injury. And there's something that happens between Roma and Juventus because we lost Zaniolo to a cruciate ligament injury in a match between these two teams. We lost Mera Demiral, if you remember as well. And now it's Chiesa. I feel like every time these two teams take each other on, something bad really happens on an injury perspective. And now I'm scared,
Yeah.
But my goodness, all of the things that you ever thought about, cliches or this is what you can depend on this is Serie A. There's nothing there. I mean, Cagliari can win, which is just beyond me, frankly speaking. Salernitana managed to win and Juventus scored 4 goals. So if there's anything that makes your mind blow up, this is Serie A. It's the unpredictability of Serie A, and it's just fantastic.
Yeah, I think you couldn't have asked for a more dramatic sort of return from the winter break than this. I mean, the 2 rounds in a few days, I think it's a little bit mad they scheduled things like that, but what a round of what a double round as well. And let's get into I guess the substance of this. I think that even in the space of this 90 minutes, I could tell you two whole self-contained stories about Jose Mourinho, right? Because so Roma had, I thought, a hugely disappointing performance against Milan on Thursday. So Milan, who are missing Frank Kessie and Benacer, they're missing 3/4 of their starting defence. They've been decimated by COVID and the Cup of Nations and some injuries on top of that. And you think this is a real chance for Roma. And Roma were not really ever in that game, I think, even though they did at one point bring it back to 2-1. And then 3 days later, they're playing against Juventus. Now, this is a big game, right? Juventus are 3 points outside the Champions League places, but Roma are within striking range. So if they win, they could level with Juventus. And if I'd been asked beforehand, even though I haven't been hugely impressed with Juventus, I would have said, yeah, Juventus will win that game. I don't believe in this Roma at all.
Really?
Yeah, I really would have done, because I was so unimpressed with Roma against Milan. Mourinho, out of nowhere, pulls this switcheroo from the 3-man defence to the 4-man defence, mirrors Juventus, goes to a 4-2-3-1. Landucci, who was on the bench for Juventus this game because Allegri was serving a touchdown man, actually admitted in his press conference, we didn't see that coming. We prepared for a 3-man defence. They came at this with this 4-man defence. It was different. And like individually, some of the changes that Mourinho made, the players didn't actually work out that great. Like he threw Maitland-Niles straight into the team, who'd arrived from Arsenal on loan like 2 days before. He put Cristante back into the midfield. And then both of those players are at fault on Juventus' first goal, right? Like Maitland-Niles gets beaten by Chiesa, and Cristante is just ball watching. He should be tracking Dybala, who ends up having all the time in the world to do a Dybala type of goal. But despite that, tactically, I felt like Mourinho won this for like 60, 70 minutes. I felt like Roma were in control of the game. I thought that Cristante and Veretout did, in fact, by adding an extra sort of element into the midfield, they did have quite a lot of control in the middle of the park. They did keep the ball away from Bentancur and Locatelli when that was the partnership for Juventus. I thought Mourinho had actually reminded us, oh yeah, like he can do this. He can change his tactics. He can get things right. And then conversely, when the game starts getting away from them, which comes to that Morata substitution, which we can also talk about in a minute, but like there was nothing. There was no answer. And then at the end of the game, you have Mourinho being what for me, and look, I know whenever we criticize Mourinho, someone wants to come at us and fine, like disagree with me, guys, but just do it respectfully and it's okay. But I really felt like his post-match comments, there was a bit where he said, oh, you know, it's really hurting my heart because I'm not used to working with a club of this profile and this is just our level. And I want the players to follow me and come up to my level rather than dragging me down to their level, basically. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, how is that? How is that the message to send to your players? You're dragging me down. Like, you've got to be as great as I am. Your results aren't great. You've lost 9 games. Like, I think we saw some great Mourinho in this game. And then for me afterwards, some terrible Mourinho.
So here's the thing. I mean, Milan for me was such a disappointment. Like, you know, we're talking about Milan side that's really been struggling to win matches, that haven't really been showing the best of themselves towards the end of 2021. You know, they always start off beautifully and then at some point the wheels start to come off. And you look and they don't have Tomori, they don't have Cagliari, they're playing with Gabbia at the back, they're playing with Kalulu as a centre-back. There's no Calabria, there are so many people missing, Benacer, Kessie, whoever you like you mentioned, Giroud up top, not Ibrahimovic initially. And it was like Roma just got it so wrong. And you just felt like Veretout was just on his own trying to overcome like so much, you know, overwhelming play by Milan that had such a clear tactical identity. I knew at every stage of the match what to do. I mean, I did think that they sort of went into safe mode a little bit too early in the second half. But this was an example of Mourinho once again, and I think he showed this at United, and I think he showed this at Tottenham, not quite understanding how to achieve balance in his midfield, because that midfield was so overrun. And it was very, very disappointing that he only chose to bring on Cristante towards the end and sort of stem the flow and stop the madness. And it's too late by then, right? Then you feel like, okay, he got it right against Juventus. I mean, this is this is a very bad Juventus, let's be honest. Yeah. But it's still Juventus. And I thought, you know what? You got it right. You played with lots of energy. You focused on set plays. You hyped up the pressure as much as possible, you know? And like you said, you changed to a 4-man defense, and it's something that they hadn't prepared, you know? And yet the mastery, like when you look at a coach, it's not somebody who gets it right in the beginning. It's somebody who understands how to change it when the things start going wrong. And that is something that, for example, Allegri and Pioli are so good at changing and spotting things and adapting. Spalletti is very good at that. But you just know straight away that Mourinho always just starts bringing on forwards. Like as automatically, you know, if you're losing, let me just change the forward line and maybe I'll get a goal. It's not like he understands what the problem is here. It was great that you padded out your midfield, but the worst thing you could have done at that moment of time was to score a third goal against Juventus. And it was almost like that allowed them to finally unbutton that damn risk-averse button that they've got on them and think to themselves, you know what? Forget Morata a second. We're going to put Locatelli next to Arthur and just try to regain control of our midfield. We're going to try to just push up the center of gravity, bring on a player like Morata who's defends from the front, who presses and actually runs towards the ball and wants to partake in final third action, something that Moise Kean doesn't do so well. Yeah. Because he is more of a classic reference point. And then that just changed everything. And so when you allow Juventus to take a risk, and for me, I feel like it's detrimental that you have to wait till you're 3-1 down before you finally start bringing on the right players. Yeah. Because it should always have been Locatelli and Arthur next to each other. I know there have been injuries and Arthur hasn't always been available, but those two make the difference. As soon as I just don't ever see Rabiot and Bentancur, the better. Because this midfield should be Weston McKennie and it should be the other two because it's greater control. It's a player that can penetrate off the ball in McKennie, and for me, it just works. And yes, it doesn't give you as much defensive solidity, but you needed to score goals at that point, and that's what Juventus did. They rolled the dice, and you know what? They came up trumps. But there was so much to admire about Juventus' performance because I thought De Sciglio, he made a mistake, but he really, really came back from that mistake with Mkhitaryan. And I thought was superb. I thought Arthur was superb. I thought the substitutions were just fantastic. The attitude, the understanding that they were in the Olimpico and they were down was terrible. But I refuse to read Gazzetta and Corriere dello Sport anymore when it comes to Juventus match because I just feel like they are way too harsh. But I did decide to read it now because I thought maybe they might be nice to Juve. They weren't. But one thing that I did read, and I'm actually going to read to you guys because I thought this was fantastic. And it was in Gazzetta, I have to say that. It said, 9th defeat in 21 games. Each time he blames a new culprit. The special ones list since the beginning of the year, he's blamed the referees, the squad, the depth, inexperience, character fragility, transfer market, but never himself. The second highest paid coach in Serie A. He's never looked to the fact that he's at fault. I mean, coming into Milan and, losing that match, he's 8 points off where Fonseca was last season. This is despite how many players he's brought in. Yeah. He's 8 points off where Fonseca was last season. If you look at the goals that they've created, last year they were 5th when it came to goals scored from open play. Only 4 teams scored more from open play than Roma. This year, they're 10th. Verona, Juventus, they've scored more from open play. What I see from Roma to me right now is a team that is very good in set pieces, very organized in one particular way, but absolutely unable to adapt to the circumstances, to change, to move the midfield around. Don't bring on Mayoral and all of these players. And I love Mayoral, don't get me wrong, but it's not about changing your forward line. Maybe what you needed is to believe more in your midfield, to try to reclaim control, add a filter there. That's your issue, but he never looks to change his midfield. Where's Eduardo Bove that everyone spoke so highly of, who's perfect off the ball? Why is Villar in his perfect rotation and circulation of the ball? I know he doesn't have the physicality, but you know what? He was tremendous against Juventus when they played in February. They lost that match, but he was tremendous. And I just feel like a lot of the time, these great players are being excluded for the fact is, Shmurodov didn't do what he's supposed to do. You bring him on for 10 minutes in a game. What do you want the guy to do? Like, he has no continuity. And you keep just changing forwards. That's not the way to arrange your team to come back in a squad that you let Juventus score 4 goals. I mean, I don't know what's worse, Bodo Glimt or this.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary. On that point, I think Juventus had scored 28 goals in their first 20 games. So, it's not even 1.5 goals a game. They were the lowest scoring team in the top half of the table. There was a stat that I thought was really damning as well about Roma's start to this season, which is that this is the first time since 1988-89 that they've lost at home in the same season to Juventus and both of the Milan clubs. So it's quite a sort of big comment. I know that they have had sort of not a great time against the bigger clubs in general recently, but it's a strange one for me, Mina, because honestly, at sort of 69 minutes, I guess, before that first goal went in, I probably would have said it's not perfect, but it's one of the best performances I've seen under Mourinho. And then the collapse was just so total in that last bit that it's extraordinary. And I do think, I know you sort of mentioned him, but I do want to just highlight fully that Morata, one swallow doesn't make a spring, one great performance doesn't suddenly fix everything that wasn't working for him. But Morata was very much at the center of all 3 goals that Juventus scored. He set up the first one. It was his shot that gets blocked before Kulusevski scores the second one. And it was him who was swapping passes with McKennie before McKennie chipped the ball in for the third one. So Morata was transformative in this game. And I think while Juventus would prefer to, and really in the long run need to, still upgrade their attack, he looks the better option than Moise Kean to me for that number 9 spot. Maybe it makes more sense to do it like this though and have him coming off the bench. I don't know. I think that attack is still a problem in general. The reason Dybala, I love that Dybala goal because that Dybala goal puts me in mind of the old Paul Pogba described him as, I can't remember the buttons anymore because I'm not actually like a PlayStation player, but I remember Pogba called him, I think he called him like a square R2 player or something, because that's the buttons that you need to do to hit like a curling shot. And that was that shot. Like before we all talked about Lorenzo Insigne and his tiragir, that was like the trademark Dybala thing, the curling shot, and that one really beautiful to look at. It's one of those shots you watch and it's like it's going yards outside the post and it comes back. The only sort of thing that needs to be qualified with is it's astonishing how much time Roma gave him that one. And it is Cristante who lost him. Cristante should have been tracking him and just completely lost him. But look, it's a good win for Juventus. And I think especially a good win when you've got Allegri not on the sideline. Landucci, his replacement, said it took 5 or 6 years off his life, so he doesn't want to do it again. But if he was responsible for those substitutions, always a bit sort of unclear when you've got a manager in the site in the stands, and they're probably trying to get messages through some way somehow. But if Landucci ultimately was responsible for those changes, look, hats off, because he made the right ones.
I just want to, just because you brought up Morata, I want to thank you for it. I'm a huge fan of Morata. I have been for absolutely ages, and people don't understand why. And I think that Morata is very successful if he's played in a certain way, and he can never be your reference point. He doesn't like to be your reference point. He doesn't want to be your reference point, and he doesn't want to work alongside creative players. He wants to be next to the reference point. You bring him on a player like Carlos Tevez or Ronaldo, and he shines because he likes to be the man in between, because that's what he wants to do. He's a movement guy. He wants to partake in the action. He wants to go around and work and create space and bully and press and be the guy that delivers an assist. I feel like he enjoys that more than when he actually scores a goal. Here's the thing that I love about him. He always makes the right technical choice. When he's on the ball, he makes the right choice, but he makes it based on textbooks. It's almost like he lacks the instinct, and that's where the problem is that he goes a lot by what he's been taught rather than what he thinks might just be the right idea, But alongside João Felix, alongside Dybala, I don't see the best of him. But when he's allowed to move a lot and the center of gravity is higher, then I think Morata shines, which is why he's shown a lot in Real Madrid. And I think why he's shown more fit for Juventus when there was the likes of obviously Vidal and Pogba and that type of thing, and Pjanic and Khedira, whoever you want to say. But when having Arthur and Locatelli being able to act as that reference point, and Morata can pull away and deliver an assist, that's where he's his best at. And I just wish if they just bought one more striker and sort of get rid of all the excess that there is, I think Morata, you would really see the best out of him. But making him your reference point or working alongside Moise Kean, it's not working because I don't know about Kean because he seemed to be very good against PSG, but for Juventus, he just doesn't seem up to the level. And another thing, I much prefer Decilio over Alexandro, or Sandro just no longer, I feel like, does it really for Juventus. And if it's Decilio and Pellegrini or Quadrado and Decilio, I'm happy with that going forward.
Yeah, I don't want to get into a big discussion on it necessarily because I don't have much more to say than just this broad point. But Alexandra is one of the most extraordinary cases for me of a player who I think a couple of years ago I thought was really one of the top players in his position, and now is, I don't know what's happened to him. He's a shadow. I think he's been a real problem for Juventus, honestly, lately.
Well, I mean, the good news for Roma is they've got some fairly easier fixtures coming up. So hopefully they can sort of build their momentum again and maybe do something special. Juventus obviously have Inter next, and they don't have Federico Chiesa now for the rest of the season.
Supercoppa.
Yes, it is the Supercoppa. It is indeed. And it's a title that, well, certainly they will lose. It is Inter after all. I think Chiesa is a huge point. And that's going to be really difficult frankly, for Juventus to make top four without that kind of player. I mean, without Ronaldo, without Chiesa, and with Dybala probably getting injured any time now, it's going to be really scary going forward. But it is what it is. And hopefully Mancini will find a way of still getting to the World Cup without this exciting player.
I'm so worried about it.
Yeah, I'm really, really worried about it too. Because it's going to be detrimental to like my life if they don't make the World Cup, frankly. But yes, I guess we have many more games to go through next. So obviously the COVID situation is getting worse around Europe. And we've seen lots of games postponed, not taking place in the Premier League. And it happened in Serie A because around 90 players, which is around 16% of Serie A, had contracted COVID. And it became a problem because certain local health authorities, which are referred to as ASLs in Italy, were asking their particular teams to quarantine or certain players to quarantine or not allowing them to go into a match. An example of this is Bologna's game against Inter that got abandoned. Bologna were not allowed to show up, basically, from their local health authority. And Inter had already traveled up and did the whole waiting for the game, warming up, and the match didn't go ahead. But Inter did have, obviously, so a few games were abandoned, including Torino's one, Venezia against Salernitana, and several others. But there's a COVID protocol now put into place. They are taking and talking to local health authorities and making them stop telling their teams to not travel or ordering them into quarantine. And so far, they're winning their appeals. And that is why all the matches took place on Sunday. And now we have a protocol that says if you have 13 players available and one of them is a goalkeeper, then the match must go ahead, which was obviously terrible news for the likes of Udinese, who had 12 of their players unavailable due to COVID. But this is the situation. We have games to play and they don't want any more postponements. Anything you'd like to add, Nicky?
Yeah, I think the issue is just that really sort of needed addressing after the first round of games, because it really was chaotic, was because of the way Italian sort of governance is set up, because the way these health bodies are set up, you just had no consistency across the whole country in terms of how things were being applied. And I think actually the best example of this was that Napoli had actually some sort of contradicting advice from two separate health boards, because they had the ASL, the health body for Central Naples, said, yeah, you're good to travel. They were in conversation with them all the way up to their leaving time before they left to go and play against Juventus in Turin. And then as they're finally getting ready to go, they have a second, completely separate, completely independent of one another, health body, the ASL for Section 2 of Naples, which is...
because it's a big city, they have several. Exactly,
and they're sectioned and they're just literally numbered 1, 2, 3 and so on. And the number 2 ASL, which is where some of their players live, said, well, under our application of these rules that we've been given by the government, these players who have had close contact with a COVID case, not players who contracted COVID, but it was Zielinski and Lobotka and one other who I'm forgetting. Rahmani. That's right. They should all quarantine. And this is with the team already on its way to Turin. So they're being told, well, those 3 players have to quarantine in the hotel. And then there was this, oh, well, they have to, maybe they can play, but they're going to have to wear a mask. And at some point, Napoli clearly made a decision in consultation with their lawyers, and they just said, we're just going to play. And if we get a fine or if we get some sort of action, we'll cross the bridge when we come to it. And, you know, I very much understand that for the club's position. The club would have been down to, if all of those players didn't play, they would have been down to only 10 outfield players from their first team squad. So it would have been really thin. But also, I think when you look back and see what happened last season, when of course it was also Napoli going to Juventus, and there was that whole saga about Napoli were told by their ASL, which was the one again for Central Naples, not to travel. And then there was a big controversy about that. And the game ended up getting initially awarded and overturned on appeal. You just see the web of complicated situations that teams were getting into. And, you know, you mentioned the Inter-Bologna game. It's a fascinating example because, well, we'd had these games before. It was the first one I could think of where it was the away team got there and the home team didn't.
Yeah.
And, you know, you had on that same weekend, teams with like 10 COVID cases, same Thursday, like teams like 10 COVID cases still going ahead and playing, and others that weren't. And
like Hellas Verona, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
And they still had to play their match.
And they still got through it, actually. But there needed to be some sort of central control, and that's what, you know, Serie A was talking to the government about, and hopefully from here it will at least be more consistent, because I think that's always the most complicated thing, is when you just have different rules being applied by different bodies that are competing levels of authority and competency, and it was just leading to a really, really chaotic start to the year.
But I just want to point out, like, I got very angry at the time when the ruling came out and Napoli managed to overturn, you know, when they went to appeal and say, well, we weren't allowed to travel up to visit Juventus and play the match. And I feel like that precedent that was set what is the domino that led to all of this madness, because now, you know, teams could all be ordered by their local health authority. They always had the power to do that. But in doing so, it almost revitalized their control and made them feel more authoritative in telling their teams not to travel up or not to attend matches. And that precedent that was set caused a lot of chaos. At the time, we should have stuck to the COVID protocol, and things should have been made clearer as to what we were allowed to do. And local health authorities should have been part of this whole planning and understand what their role is and how much control they do actually have and to exert. And everyone should have been involved in this. But by setting that precedent and allowing Napoli to replay that match when they felt better, even though at the time they had less than 5 cases of corona, it was annoying to watch. And this is, I feel like, what's caused so many problems. But thankfully, we do have a COVID protocol now, and it is in place. And this shouldn't happen going forward, where we see matches abandoned.
I mean, it's Italy, so you never know what's coming next, but
you really never know.
Said with love, said by an Italian with love. I'm allowed to say it because I'm Italian.
Yeah, damn straight. Everything's said with love. We love the madness. That's why it's a Greek tragedy every match. But let's move on to the game, because Inter did finally play a game. And it wasn't Bologna, but it was Lazio. Lazio were the only team to have defeated Inter so far this season in Serie A. And Lazio obviously were the team under Simone Inzaghi last season, caught between different ideologies. Are they a Sarri team? Are they still an Inzaghi team? Who are they? We don't know. Inter, of course, winter champions and a beautiful team and managed to win 2-1. But they suffered a bit, didn't they?
They did. To me, Inter were very clearly the better team in this game. I think there was what made it Inter suffering was just that after they took the lead through Bastoni, Ciro Immobile scores a goal, which was a very Ciro Immobile goal. It was very opportunistic, and like he's good at it. And then they didn't have the lead for a long time. And of course, the longer you don't have the lead against a good team like Lazio, who have a player like Ciro Immobile, who can punish you that one time you give him a chance, that breeds some anxiety. But I never felt like Inter were anything other than dictating the game overall. I always felt like Inter were again, aside from that simple fact of the scoreline and the potential, the goal scoring potential of this Lazio team, I never felt like Inter were not in control of the game personally. I thought it was interesting the way the goals did come, with both of them being scored by centre-backs and the second one being set up by a centre-back as well. Just a brilliant cross, I thought, from Bastoni. And I loved Skriniar's celebration afterwards. It was a great header off the other side of the bar.
Wasn't it amazing?
He celebrated like he really meant it, Like, I love it when players, none of the sort of pre-orchestrated, pre-planned celebration, just letting all of that flow out of you because you're so excited. I felt like he was in the moment. And look, this certainly we're at 8 consecutive wins now, but this was not an occasion to dissuade me from the fact that Inter remain going into the second half of the season very much the strong favourites to go on and retain this title.
I mean, frankly speaking, I want Inter to win the Champions League now, just because I just see them play their football and I think it's a remarkable team. And also because any opportunity for me to try to explain that Antonio Conte's, this is such an upgrade for me to Antonio Conte's team. I think he definitely laid the groundwork on a mentality level because you can see how much Inter are a mature side that don't ever get flustered, that never worry or panic into anything. Everything is done with control and measure, a good temperament in the side. Could have a lot to do with the fact that Vidal's not starting games, but it is a team that is so impressive in the sense that on this occasion, it was their centre-back scoring their goals, assisting, scoring goals, playing forward. You find the forwards partaking in defensive work off the ball. It is a side that is like total football all over. There is nothing that these players can't seem to do. Bastoni is the 16th goal scorer of the season. This is a team that has kept, a clean sheet for so many. Obviously, Ciro Immobile is always a guy that you probably can't keep a clean sheet against. But up until him, they had kept 587 minutes without conceding a goal. It is a remarkable team. And I love the fact, like you said, that the celebration, because despite that, they are not a team that reckons itself. It's a team that celebrates every victory going forward, every moment, every moment of happiness, whether it's Dumfries doing something exciting. And at the time, they all celebrated with him to make him feel confident. It's Skriniar and Bastoni on this occasion talking about, should he buy him dinner? There is a genuine happiness within that squad. And when Bastoni says we're really having fun, you can see that. And when you have that kind of harmony in the dressing room and on a tactical level, it's so unpredictable and exciting to watch. I feel like this team should win the Champions League. Obviously, I don't know. I guess the only other side of it is I'm genuinely worried about Lazio. I know that they made Inter suffer and they have some great players in there, but I don't know who they are at the moment. I feel like they're really struggling to show Sarri's football or to try to because they sometimes revert to who they used to be. And I don't think they really know who they are. They've conceded 39 goals in 21 games. This is the 7th defeat of the season. I don't get why they're in such a rush to keep, to extend the contract of Sarri. I just feel like are we sure that this is the team that he can really work with? How many more players should you bring in? Because they're having cash flow issues. And you can see that's visibly irritating Sarri because he doesn't have the players he wants. Going forward, is this a side you trust? Because I never know what to expect from Lazio.
Yeah, well, I mean, talking about cash flow, and let's not forget that since we last made this podcast, Mina, Lazio's owner, Claudio Lotito, finally had to relinquish control of Salernitana, a situation that should have been resolved a long time ago. But no doubt feeling aggrieved, as he always does, Claudio Lotito. Look, Simone Inzaghi is a very good manager. I think we knew that before he came to Inter, but I think he's really proven himself already this season in a way that he couldn't do at Lazio, right? Just because he'd been at Lazio, he'd built most of his reputation at Lazio. We needed to see him in a different context to know, because not that it isn't impressive to exceed expectations at one club, which for me, he did a lot at Lazio. I think he was well above the expectations there. But you prove yourself that you can do it in a different context, it raises you up again. And I think that it was in the same way that we thought it was going to be difficult for someone to come in and fill Antonio Conte's shoes. The reality is it was going to be difficult for someone to come in and fill Simone Inzaghi's shoes at Lazio, right? Like there's not many managers that I think would have walked in there and suddenly done a better job than he was doing. Whether or not Sarri is doing a good enough job, whether or not he's someone who I have faith that project is moving in the right direction. Yeah, I'm with you. I have a lot of reservations. I think there's lots of pieces in that team where I struggle to see how things get better, and I can imagine how things get worse, right? So Ciro Immobile is brilliant, remains brilliant, has been brilliant for a while. He's still scoring goals. Where does Ciro Immobile go from here, though, right? Like there's no way that he can really go up. And over time, it's easy to see how he goes down. Like, cause like everybody, he is subject to time and age and everything. It's not happening yet. He's still playing at a very high level, but where's your trajectory? And then I look at a player like Milinkovic-Savic and I think to myself, at times, still such a commanding player. I thought this was not one of his better games. I think he's had better games, much better games than this recently. But has it taken a step forward in all of these last sort of few years of Lazio? And that, counts under Inzaghi as well. Like I feel like he might have peaked a couple of seasons ago, maybe even 3 seasons ago, actually. And
yeah,
but I certainly don't feel like under Sarri this season, there's been some great revelation of Milinkovic-Savic, some great, now we're playing Sarri ball and I'm finding some untapped resource that I didn't know about before. And it just feels like a lot of that all through the side, right? Felipe Anderson obviously went away, has come back. He still does some good things, but do I think that he's a cornerstone you're going to build this team on? No. Where are the cornerstones of this next great Lazio team? Luis Alberto for me definitely is missing. Simone Inzaghi is not playing at the levels he has before. So I don't think it's a disaster, this Lazio team, but I do feel like it's drifting a bit at the moment. And it's such a common conversation that we have. Like everywhere Sarri goes, there's always this conversation of, he needs time. You've got to let him get his ideas in. And maybe next season, if he's still there, it will look different. But I don't have that sense at the moment. It doesn't feel like it's coalescing into something. If anything, it feels like it's just gradually drifting away from something that was really, really good for several seasons into something that's, I don't know, just fine, but not something that's a team that's going to keep pushing on and pushing for Champions League places.
Obviously, I think one club that's done it right in terms of who they've picked as their coach to continue their approach and their style of football is Napoli. And I think, honestly, Spalletti has done such a tremendous job. Obviously, his team, having Osimhen, having Anguissa, having that beautiful spine in place has really helped. But despite their many absences, they got a point against Juventus. They defeated Sampdoria with a fabulous performance from Petagna. And they are really riding the wave of all these absences and doing very well for themselves. But we have to talk about Lorenzo Insigne. 30 minutes into the match against Sampdoria, he was taken off. And afterwards, there was a question to Spalletti about how he feels having being, okay, let's be clear. Lorenzo Insigne has agreed to join Toronto in the summer. So he's going to stay at Napoli till the end of the season, but they won't renew his contract unless he takes a pay cut. So he's decided to move to Toronto, start a new adventure with them in the MLS. And it's an exciting move for him and his family. But obviously, it's been a huge talking point in Italy and across the world as to his decision to really go to the MLS. Is he too young? Or what happened from an ambitious point of view? Spalletti said that he's really glad to have him till the end of the season. He is the captain of Napoli. He is so important as a leader and as a chief creator, if you like, a beautiful player on the ball. Obviously, I've always had question marks about him, generally speaking. But I want to speak to you, Nicky, about what you think of his decision to join Toronto. I guess so early in his career, perhaps.
Yeah, so you and I obviously have spoken about this, I guess off air, and you know how I feel about it. But I guess people who listen to this podcast haven't heard me talk about it. And I, as you know, Mina, I sort of have quite a sort of, I don't know what to sort of describe it as, like I suppose a sort of, I guess a person-centered view on this, which is that I think we treat footballers so much of the time almost as if they're like robots who should constantly be driven by the things that we perceive as what they should be doing, right? So they should be purely motivated by being number one, and every footballer should have exactly the same mindset, and that should be all that they're focused on. And the reality is that they don't. Footballers are all individuals. They're all people. They've all got their own life stories going on. There are plenty, in fact, of footballers playing at the highest level who literally don't even like football. I think Benoit Asso-Akoto spoke about that when he was at Tottenham. He didn't like football. Now, Insigne is not that. Insigne loves football. But I think, obviously, we're waiting for him to give his explanation if there's some point, which I'm sure will happen. He'll give an interview and he'll give a good conversation about it. But what I think is that I can really understand if you were born in a city, you grew up in that city, you spent almost your entire life in one city, and that city happens to be one of the most intense football cities in Europe, one of the places where if you are successful, you're the most scrutinized, you're the most sort of attention paid to you. I think Gonzalo Higuain talked about it, even living as a footballer with means and being quite detached from lots of things. Like he could be in his own private home and going straight out onto the water, even like going out into the Gulf of Naples, and out of nowhere there'd be like boats of people being like, "Hey, Gonzalo," like talking to him. You really do have a certain lifestyle that is particular. Now, look, I'm not getting my little violin out and asking anyone to feel sorry for people either, because this is a huge privilege to be a footballer, to have that success, to have that opportunity. But I'm just trying to sort of put this position that I have, that footballers are also people, and he's been there all that time. I think you could certainly make a case that Insigne could look around at what he has in Naples and say, am I going to win more than I already have here? He's won the Coppa Italia. He's finished as a Serie A runner-up a couple of times. This season, maybe it looked for a while like they could win the league. Maybe they still could, but he's probably not going to win the league in Naples. It's a very hard thing to do there. And understand, at least from the outside, I can understand how you might want to change. Now, I can look at that as well and say, yeah, but don't you want to go somewhere where you could win something? He's good enough. He's good enough to go to a team, whether it's in Serie A or another place in Europe, and win things. He's good enough to be wanted by the sorts of teams that want those things. But he's also at an age where...
Is he though?
But, all right, we'll come back to that. Let me finish the thought. Let me finish the thought, and then we'll come back to that. But he's also at an age, 30, where if you want to make the really big, lucrative move, this is now it. No one's going to offer him this contract in 4 or 5 years' time. And someone has offered him a lot of money, a huge amount of money, to go and play in Toronto. But I actually think it's not just the money, Mina. I think this is the bit which I always want to focus on. Like, yeah, the money's there. Of course it's there. It's a foundation stone. Without the money, none of this happens. But I also just understand, as someone who myself in 2012 left my full-time position at The Guardian to go freelance so that I could go and live in America for a couple of years because I had an opportunity to do that living with an ex. And I thought, it's an adventure. Let's go do it. I think sometimes that adventure in life we deny to athletes because they're athletes and they're not allowed to do these things. What if, as well as the money, which of course, again, I will say is a foundation stone of all of this, what if Lorenzo Insigne thinks, wow, Toronto, I've heard it's this fun city and my family could grow up there and we'd have less of that media attention that my kids have to put up with where we are now. I think that's real. I think that's a real thing that we don't think about. And that's my opinion on this transfer. But also, I know you want to question whether or not the big clubs in Europe actually would want him or not.
I mean, if there's ever a reason to say you're the light and I'm the darkness, it's very much based on this conversation, right? I mean, talk about taking the positive side of all these things, you know? And it's true. There's nothing I can disagree with. I mean, off air, obviously, Nicky and I are friends. And there have been times when we've discussed, like, you know, when you're a journalist, you've got to, like, it's a constant hustle if you're a freelance, you know, like, where are you going to join? Are you going to be part of ESPN? Are you going to accept this move? Are you going to move to CBS? It's a constant hustle. And there just comes a time when you think, I want to have a nice balance. I don't always want to be saying yes to like 1,000 jobs, which means I'm working nonstop for a whole week. And actually, I want to enjoy my life as well, you know? And if that means that I don't make as much money, then so be it, you know? And Nicky has a great point in saying, why should we deny that to other people?
And his option is make more money and do it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and have an adventure with your family. You know, this poor boy that's never left Napoli, and like, you know, I mean, let's all cry.
I said again, I'm not getting the violin out for him. Like a lot of people would kill for his lifestyle. I'm not getting the violin out for him. I'm just saying that there's more to life than one place always.
Now, here's that part, but obviously, I'm sure that our listeners are not Grey's Anatomy fans necessarily, but I'm going to refer to something in which a brain surgeon's wife, he was talking to his wife, and he said to her, would you just respect me if I just gave it all up and just wanted to enjoy the outdoors and live my life and not always be the man that's doing all these surgeries, that's saving everyone, and just save myself for a bit? And she looked at him and she said, I would greatly disrespect you. And I remember thinking that was such a strong line, you know, like as in your wife is being like, unless you do this, you have none of my respect, you know? And I thought, wow, that's strong. And she said, because you have such a privilege. You have something that everything and everyone in the world wants to have. This ability to save lives, this ability to change and rescue people who have, you know, damaged brains or whatever it is. Obviously, Insigne is not saving lives. He's entertaining many, but he's not saving lives. But he is privileged.
But football's important. Football matters to a lot of people.
Yes,
it does affect people's lives. Exactly. I understand that. Yeah.
He is privileged in the sense that he has a talent that so many of us wish we had. And I think that is perhaps when fans say to themselves, like, you know, yes, they want these guys to be professional. They want these guys to be at it and egotistical and desperate for the victory. And because you are so lucky to have this special talent, especially Insigne, because unlike your, I don't know, Antonio Conte's or even Ronaldo, when he speaks, he says he works so hard for it. But Insigne is naturally gifted. He is a player where he has been touched by the gods. And you do feel there's a part of you that just thinks, it's a real shame that didn't coincide necessarily with a stronger desire to prove yourself on the biggest stages, in the biggest finals, for the biggest clubs. And this goes down and always boils down to the point where I've never believed in Napoli's chances because their captain is somebody who doesn't believe in their chances. And he has every right to choose his happiness. And I will never begrudge any player to do that. You want to move to Toronto? You want to have one last huge paycheck when Napoli wants to pay you less? Yeah, I totally agree with that. I also want to be paid around 11 million, frankly speaking, to like, you know, be a leader in a different. You should prioritize your family's wealth, their happiness, and whatever it should be. But there is a part of us that you also have to understand that we wish we had your talents. And we wish we were capable of being the leader of Napoli, of taking an opportunity to play with Real Madrid or Barcelona or Liverpool or Manchester City. I think now he's too old to get those contracts. So I see why Toronto makes sense. I don't think anymore he's at a level where Liverpool will be looking. Liverpool or Manchester City, I'm worried that Kane is too old for these huge opportunities anymore. Because now it's constantly younger and younger. We're seeing Jude Bellingham. We're seeing, Kylian Mbappe. I mean, in a second, Pietro Pellegrini is too old for anything in football anymore. Football's changed. And Insigne is 30. And for me, he's never shown on a mentality level to be the guy that makes the difference. When Napoli really need a leader to make the difference. He is beautiful on the ball. But there is that lack of grinta. And you see that in this decision to move to Toronto. I think it's detrimental also for the national team because I cannot help but think that Mancini or whomever replaces him in the future might forget you. When Sebastian Giovinco chose to go to Toronto, he wasn't being played. You are still Insigne. You are still a Euro 2020 winner. You may not move to Liverpool or Manchester City, but there is an opportunity for you to still make the difference and be the leader that takes the club and builds it further. He doesn't want that. He hasn't been given that opportunity. He doesn't want to hustle for that. I get it. But you also have to be open to the fact that we will criticize you because we are jealous of you. And we wish we had your talents on the ball. And perhaps we might have, won something with it.
I love having these conversations with you, Mina, because I think you expressed a perspective that's different to mine that I still was nodding along with and thinking, God, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. And you bring me part of the way to your way of thinking as well. So you're awesome.
Oh, that's why we're friends.
I know. Do you know one of the other things I did think about is I wonder, and again, so much of this is speculation until he talks about it, right? But I did wonder to myself how much winning the Euros this summer maybe made him feel more open to something like this because now he has won something really big. It wasn't in club football, but he's won something that's really genuinely very few footballers get to win in their career. And so he can walk away if he needs to saying, I'm a European champion. You can't take that away from me. But definitely a fascinating one. Definitely something that as an Italian hurts me because I feel like it's detrimental to Italy's World Cup chances. Having said that, we've got to qualify first, Mina, and that's not looking as comfortable as it should. So who knows? Maybe there'll be no World Cup for us to worry about by the time he's over there. So yeah, fingers crossed. But
no, I mean, fingers crossed we always have something to worry about because I cannot imagine another World Cup without Italy. I mean, that's basically a decade of no Italy in the World Cup, right? But impressive from Napoli for them to have gotten 4 points at the start of 2022. Are you more impressed with Napoli or are you more impressed with Milan? Because, Milan have just come out roaring again, the beautiful victory over Roma and then managed to just put Venezia aside, scored in the first 2 minutes with Zlatan Ibrahimovic. No Bennacer, no Kessie, we've discussed this, no Calabria, no pretty much anyone. Yeah, but Leao is back. It's fabulous to watch. And Milan just look like they have just such a strong identity that when sometimes they play this way, you think they're unstoppable. And somewhere along the lines, the wheels come off and you think, wait, what just happened here? I can't figure them out sometimes.
Yeah, between the two, it's Milan for me. Mina, I think they're the only team left that could push Inter to the end of the season. I very much expect Inter to win the league at this point. But if it wasn't Inter, I would be shocked if it was anyone other than Milan, put it that way. I really don't have faith in anyone else, partly because just where things are in the table as well. But I'm pretty sure I said it on this podcast towards the end of last year. I know I was saying it in general towards the end of last year. To me, Leao has been such a big loss for this team when he was out because of just how he obliges opposition teams to play. Because when Leao is on the pitch with that pace, especially because Brahim Diaz, I think, went off the boil a bit towards the end of last year as well. But when Leao is on the pitch with such direct running the way he plays, I feel like your opponents have two options. There's option one is sit deeper, which suits Milan because then they can bring their whole center of gravity up the pitch and play in a different way. Or you have to dice with footballing death by sticking with your higher line and risking Leao going in behind you, which is, as I think I said before, like it's what happened with Liverpool at Anfield. Liverpool at Anfield, who were dominating Milan, but then forgot to think about how fast this Milan team can be. And I think when there's been a period when he was out and Ibrahimovic was on the pitch, and sure, Ibrahimovic was scoring goals, but the whole center of gravity of this Milan team moved deeper because you no longer had Leao scaring opponents backwards. And he's come back, and actually he and Ibrahimovic have combined immediately. They did it in the Roma game when he came off the bench. They did it in the first minute or first 2 minutes of the Venezia game. Actually, the two of them can give each other so much because they're so different. And I just think Leao has quietly become really, really fundamental to Pioli's Milan. And I'm excited that he's back. And it's still a different, difficult period to start this year with the Cup of Nations and missing some important players. But if they can get through it and still be touching distance to Inter, I think we might still have a title race that goes at least to near the end. Whether or not it will go all the way down to the wire, who knows? It's a long way to go still. But I think if those things can come together, this Milan team still has that potential in it for me.
I mean, when you're comparing them to Inter really haven't had to suffer with very many absences, right? I mean, everyone was talking about Çalhanoğlu not being available, and that was like their biggest absence. But otherwise, Milan have just dealt with so much over the season and last season as well. I wonder how they would fare if it was just all their players available to them throughout the season with only minor, small absences, you know? And then I would love to see what they can do. But let me just get some big things out of the way in the sense that Venezia were the 80th team that Zlatan Ibrahimovic has scored against in the top 5 leagues. And for the second time in his career, he has now scored in 6 consecutive away games. I mean, wow. Yeah. Secondly, I am a little bit worried about Venezia. This was a team that I really felt like started to find their rhythm, and they started to be very interesting. If you remember the reverse fixture, it took ages before Milan finally penetrated through, because Venezia may not be a team that scores a lot of goals to get the Roman game a second, but they are not that team. But they are defensively solid, and they do usually have a good unit. But the wheels have come off entirely. And now it's been 5 defeats and 2 draws in their last 7 games. So I don't know what's going there, but things need to change. And I thought it was interesting that Zanetti said it's difficult when you have a team with so many different nationalities. And we're trying to combine all of that and put it into one team with one identity. So I hope they're not a team that we just admire, but that eventually gets demoted. But speaking of them, and you highlighted Leao, and I think that he is such a tremendous player. I did have a problem with his consistency, so I hope he manages to keep that up. But another player I really want to focus on as well is Sandro Tonali, because, I mean, I know that we might have lost Chiesa. I mean, we have lost Chiesa, and we might lose Insigne as well going forward for the national team. But Sandro Tonali is just fabulous. I mean, the different roles, how he adapts his game. He can be in a more offensive, like attacking player, like he was against Roma, concerned more with defense, like he was against Venezia. He's just everything right now. And for a midfield in which, like last year, was so dependent on that understanding between Bennacer and Kessié, and Tonali was sort of this bit player that never looked like he could struggled to make that step up from Brescia to Milan. And to now be this player that I think, frankly speaking, is better than Bennacer and Kessié actually, even this season. He's just everything. And there's very little, I don't even know when people try to compare him, is he Gattuso, Pirlo? He's everyone. He really is everyone. And I just, I want him to be a staple in the Italian national team. And I love that he's carved out a place for himself in Milan, in which he's just getting all the plaudits from the likes of Maldini and obviously Stefano Pioli, because he he really is the man that's making the difference in the middle.
Yeah, he's been brilliant. I think, look, Milan, they don't have the depth of Inter. Inter have the real deep squad, but I think it's been a real sort of triumphant couple of games for Tonali, obviously. I think also, look, two of the sort of more disregarded players, Gabbia and Kalulu, who have given us a couple of good performances at centre-back. Bakayoko has come in and done his job. They're showing resources above and beyond. I think it's great that Mike Maignan is, of course, there as well and back and healthy in goal. But long way to go. But I feel a lot better about this Milan team than I do about any team except Inter, frankly. So that's where I am on Milan, really.
Well, long may there be an interesting title challenge, and the race for top four is just getting more and more exciting. Obviously, Torino are taking on Fiorentina today. We saw Roma, Juventus yesterday. There are other teams that will continue to strike fear in our hearts. Empoli didn't manage it against Sassuolo, but at least we're happy that Raspadori is scoring. That should help for the national team as well. Anything you want to mention extra?
It's not just Raspadori, it's all the Italians up front for Sassuolo. It's what it's going to come. So it's going to come down to in the end in that playoff. We're just going to need to field Scamacca, Raspadori and Berardi and say, here we go. It used to be Juve Italia. That's how they used to make that abridged version. It's going to be Sassuolo Italia. I don't know. Italuolo, something like that.
Italuolo. Yeah, that's a great one.
Look, a nice 5-1 win over an Empoli team who pretty good Empoli. So that was a really impressive win for them. Really impressive 6-2 win for Atalanta as well. Crazy start to the new year, Mina. There's so much to say that we could be here probably for another few hours, except we can't because we have both got plenty more on our plate. But there's good news is we'll keep on coming back every week, right? So we can keep talking about these things as the 2022 goes on.
Yes, absolutely. Usually I would have a limerick in place, but because we've had so much to talk about, I will save it for next week. Also, can you actually submit nice stuff for us to make a limerick out of? You know, we miss your wonderful comments. We've had some interesting emails. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like they're just for us, so I don't want to reveal them on the limerick. But if you do want a limerick to be created, then do send us some interesting stuff so I can be inspired to write about it. But that's all we have time for this week. We will, of course, be back on Friday with a Chronicles Q&A mailbag show. Join our Patreon and become a Chronicles Tifosi fan at patreon.com/Serie A Chronicles. And if you do, you get access to exclusive podcasts. And I'm going to say eventually because not just quite yet. But also, do get your questions in on Twitter at Serie A Chronpod with the hashtag Chronicles Q&A. You can find us on Twitter at Nicky Bandini, at Mina Rizuki. And please subscribe to the Serie A Chronicles YouTube channels for clips of the show. Leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It's been wonderful to come back in 2022 and start chatting football again. Thank you, Nicky. Did you enjoy yourself?
Oh, it was so much fun. I can't wait to see. I'm going to see you tomorrow for Sky Sports News again. So I'm enjoying the start of 2022 for how much Mina Rizuki time it has in it.
Well, don't worry. We'll take over one more channel as well, just to make sure that you're constantly getting us. You know, this is where the hustle comes in. But thank you to everyone who joins us, and back on Friday. So make sure you tune in. Ciao for now.
Insigne, Verratti l'ha visto, eccolo servito, proviamo a farci vedere con Immobile che è andato sulla traccia opposta, ecco il pallone per Immobile, posizione regolare, ha tenuto la porta, c'è Chiesa in area di rigore, Chiesa, la Chiesa, di nuovo al centro del villaggio, ancora al centro del villaggio, nella stessa porta.
Sports Social Podcast Network. Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of statistics, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and an enormous selection of players and stat options are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million football fans who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.